Remember those easy American breakfasts that made mornings feel whole? In the 1950s, these simple meals brought comfort to busy early hours. When did we trade warmth for convenience? And was it worth it? Baked apple cinnamon oatmeal was the kind of breakfast that could stop you in your tracks the moment you stepped into the kitchen. One whiff of baked apples, cinnamon, and warm oats, and you knew someone cared enough to make something real. In the 1950s, it was not just about feeding people. It was about comforting them. Oatmeal was cheap, apples were common, and cinnamon? Well, that was a pantry staple in almost every American home. Housewives leaned into baked breakfasts like this because you could prepare it the night before, pop it in the oven, and serve it piping hot in the morning without the chaos. Some versions used brown sugar or molasses, others added raisins or walnuts, but the bones of the recipe stayed the same. It was hearty enough for Dad before his shift, sweet enough for the kids, and easy enough to stretch for a family of 5. Most importantly, it filled the house with that soft smell of warmth and safety, something a cold cereal just could not pull off. It made breakfast feel a little more like Sunday, even on a Monday. A small, fragrant ritual that made the whole house feel stitched together by cinnamon and care. Cornmeal griddle cakes were one of those no-fuss breakfasts that got the job done with nothing but grit, literally. In the post-war years, cornmeal was everywhere. It was affordable, dependable, and endlessly adaptable. Housewives used it as a stand-in for flour when money was tight, and these griddle cakes were one of the best ways to make a warm, filling breakfast without using up all your eggs or milk. Just a little cornmeal, water or milk, maybe an egg if you had one to spare, and you had a skillet-ready batter in minutes. The texture was slightly crisp around the edges, with a hearty middle that soaked up butter or syrup like it was born to. You might get applesauce on the side if it was fruit season, or just a smear of jam if sugar rations had eased up. Cornmeal griddle cakes reminded folks of simpler times, back when breakfast was cooked by hand and served with love, even if it came from a pan that was older than you were. It might not have looked like much, but it kept people full and it tasted like home. Sometimes that was more than enough. Creamed mushrooms on toast was what passed for luxury in the modest kitchens of the 1950s. Not luxury in the fine dining sense, but in the way that creamy, savory warmth could feel a little bit like being pampered, even if you were still in your housecoat and slippers. Mushrooms, especially canned or foraged ones, were cheap and shelf-stable, and a quick bechamel-style sauce made from milk, butter, and flour turned them into something decadent. You would slice up white bread, toast it until golden, and ladle the creamy mushrooms right on top. Maybe you would throw in some onion or parsley if the garden had any left, or stir in a splash of broth to deepen the flavor. It was earthy, filling, and soft around the edges. Breakfast that did not demand a lot, but gave a whole lot back. It was served to guests, to husbands home from night shifts, or to little kids who needed something nourishing before school. It was simple, humble, and completely satisfying. Brunch today might have the bells and whistles, but back then, this dish was elegance on a dime. Egg custard cups were the little breakfast miracle that came out of ration books and post-war sensibility. Eggs and milk were precious, but when you used them right, you could stretch them into something soft, sweet, and filling all at once. You would whisk up a simple mixture of eggs, milk, sugar, and a pinch of nutmeg, pour it into little ceramic cups, and bake them gently until just set. No fancy tools, no need for a crust or garnish, just warmth in a cup. For kids, it was almost like dessert for breakfast. For adults, it was protein-packed fuel wrapped in comfort. Some homemakers added breadcrumbs or raisins, others kept it plain and pure, but the heart of the recipe was always the same. It was dignified, cozy, and just a little bit special. You did not need maple syrup or powdered sugar. The texture alone, smooth, light, almost wobbly, was enough to keep you coming back. If you ever find a cracked old recipe card with baked egg custard scribbled in fading blue ink, that is a treasure worth holding on to. Wheaties with warm milk and banana slices might sound painfully simple today, but in the 1950s, this was the definition of a balanced breakfast. Before we had protein bars and energy drinks, there was this: a bowl of America's favorite cereal, softened with warm milk and topped with slices of whatever fruit you had on hand, usually bananas. Warm milk was not just a cozy touch, it was a trick parents used to make breakfast feel like a hug. Bananas brought in that natural sweetness and texture, and Wheaties were advertised as the breakfast of champions for a reason. This was the meal of athletes, go-getters, and school kids with scraped knees and high hopes. Mothers believed in it, kids depended on it, and the radio jingle pretty much sealed the deal. If you grew up in the post-war years, chances are this was on your table more than once. It was not flashy, it was not rich, but it was dependable and good, qualities that mattered more than anything else back then. Ham and potato hash with fried egg was the kind of breakfast that used every last scrap in your fridge and turned it into something that tasted like a Sunday morning. Leftover ham was never wasted. You would cube it up, fry it with diced potatoes, maybe a chopped onion if you had one, and finish it all off with a sizzling egg on top. This was a skillet meal, the kind that filled the whole kitchen with the sound of oil popping and the smell of something good. Housewives loved it because it was fast and filling. Husbands loved it because it was hot and hearty. Kids loved it because, well, fried potatoes and egg yolks are hard to beat. No one called it hash to be trendy. It was just the term for everything you had left, cooked right. And when the egg yolk broke over those crispy potatoes, you would swear you were at a diner instead of a Formica table with chipped salt shakers. Sometimes the best breakfasts come from what you almost threw away. Buttermilk biscuits with honey butter were pure comfort wrapped in a golden, flaky bite. You could taste the love in every layer. Buttermilk was a kitchen staple back then. Not something you bought in a carton, but something that came from letting milk sit a little too long. People used what they had. Biscuit dough came together quickly, especially for women who could eyeball measurements better than any cookbook. Cut with a drinking glass, baked in a hot oven and split open to reveal soft, steaming centers, these biscuits were the kind of breakfast you made on slow mornings when there was time to breathe. Honey butter? That was just softened butter whipped with a drizzle of honey, cheap, easy, and outrageously good. The sweetness melted into those warm biscuits like syrup into pancakes. You might serve it with jam, eggs, or sausage, but the biscuit was always the star. There was something grounding about starting your day with one. It said, "We may not have much, but we are going to eat well." Grapefruit broiled with brown sugar was the 1950s version of classy. There was something about taking a humble fruit, adding a spoonful of brown sugar, and sliding it under the broiler that just made it feel elevated. This was not about sweetness. It was about ritual. Housewives would slice a grapefruit in half, loosen the segments with a serrated knife, sprinkle on the sugar, and broil it just long enough to caramelize the top. The result was part breakfast, part showpiece. You would serve it warm, on a proper saucer, maybe with a sprig of mint if you were feeling fancy. It showed up at brunches, bridal showers, or special breakfasts when the in-laws were in town. For kids, it was a little sour, a little sweet, and a lot of spectacle. For adults, it felt like something from a hotel menu, without ever leaving the house. Grapefruit might not be the go-to fruit today, but in the 1950s, it was breakfast with a wink and a little flame. Cottage cheese pancakes were a bit of a surprise, light, fluffy, and somehow richer than they had any right to be. Back then, cottage cheese was not a diet food or a sad side dish. It was a protein-packed miracle that found its way into everything, including pancakes. You would fold the cheese into a simple batter of eggs, flour, and milk, and the result was tender pancakes with a slight tang and an almost creamy bite. These were not sugar bombs. They were clean, filling, and quietly nutritious. Housewives looking to stretch a carton of eggs or cut down on flour loved them, and health-conscious families welcomed the change from typical flapjacks. You might top them with applesauce, sour cream, or just a pat of butter and a pinch of salt. They cooked quickly, smelled fantastic, and had the kind of texture that makes you pause between bites. Cottage cheese pancakes were proof that you could eat smart without feeling like you were missing out. Prune whip with toast soldiers sounds like something from a children's storybook, but in the 1950s, it was as real as milk bottles on the porch. Prunes were pantry royalty back then, cheap, shelf-stable, and surprisingly nutritious. Housewives would stew them down until soft, whip them with egg whites or cream to make a fluffy, pudding-like texture, and serve the result in little cups. Add toast soldiers, thin strips of buttered toast for dipping, and suddenly breakfast felt playful. This dish was especially popular for children or older folks who needed something soft, gentle, and easy to digest. But it was not just hospital food. It had charm, it had ritual, and it had a light, fruity sweetness that cut through the usual heaviness of breakfast plates. You did not need powdered sugar or cinnamon sticks. You just needed patience, a saucepan, and someone who remembered how to make it. Prune whip might be forgotten now, but back then, it was breakfast with a spoon and a little side of love. Creamed cornmeal mush was what happened when you took one of the humblest foods around and gave it a second life on the skillet. Originally born out of necessity during the Great Depression, it never quite left American kitchens. You would cook cornmeal slowly with water or milk until it thickened into a porridge, pour it into a loaf pan, and let it chill overnight. The next morning, you would slice it into thick slabs, pan-fry them until golden, and drizzle on syrup or melted butter. Some folks even added a sprinkle of salt for balance, or cinnamon when sugar was tight. It was a breakfast that felt like a little bit of effort went a long way. Housewives liked it because it was cheap, filling, and made use of leftovers without waste. Kids liked it because it was crispy on the outside, soft on the inside, and tasted like something sweet without being too heavy. No one called it gourmet, but everyone knew it worked. Cornmeal mush was honest food. No frills, no fuss, just something hot and good that stuck to your ribs. Banana fritters dusted with powdered sugar were a breakfast treat that made even an ordinary Tuesday morning feel like a celebration. Bananas were one of the few fruits you could count on to be affordable, especially as trade routes opened back up after the war. Housewives figured out quickly that a ripe banana could stretch a batter and give it flavor, texture, and sweetness all at once. The fritters themselves were little rounds or drops of banana-laced dough, fried in a shallow pan and dusted while still hot with a shake of powdered sugar. Crispy outside, soft and warm inside, like breakfast donuts without the weight. They were golden brown, slightly caramelized, and just messy enough to make kids grin from ear to ear. Some people added a pinch of nutmeg or a splash of vanilla, but the basic version did just fine. You could make a whole plate in under 20 minutes with pantry staples and 2 overripe bananas. Banana fritters were the kind of thing that turned leftovers into joy. That made them a classic. Poached eggs on buttered rice were the definition of doing more with less. Leftover rice from the night before? Perfect. Crack a fresh egg and poach it gently until the whites were barely set, the yolk still runny. Place it over a small mound of reheated rice that had been stirred with a bit of butter, salt, and sometimes chopped parsley if the garden allowed. What you had was a soft, savory dish that filled your belly without emptying your fridge. In the 1950s, rice was becoming more common in American kitchens, thanks in part to wartime rationing, which had introduced families to global staples they might not have tried otherwise. This dish borrowed from that new familiarity, combining simple ingredients into something almost elegant. The egg yolk would soak into the rice, turning each bite into something rich and satisfying. It was also a favorite for older folks, those with tender stomachs, or families watching every penny. You did not need toast when you had this. It was warmth in a bowl. Applesauce donuts were soft little miracles that tasted like autumn and love and maybe just a little bit of nostalgia. Housewives back then were no strangers to baking in bulk, and applesauce, especially the homemade kind, was a clever way to stretch eggs, oil, and sugar in a batter. You would mix it with flour, spices like cinnamon and nutmeg, maybe a touch of clove, then fry or bake the donuts until golden and pillowy. The result was a breakfast treat that walked the line between cake and bread, sweet but not too sweet. You could roll them in sugar or just eat them warm and plain, soft on the inside and slightly crisp around the edges. These donuts were often made in big batches, stored in tins, and handed out to family, neighbors, or anyone passing through. In some homes, they were Saturday breakfast. In others, they were school lunch add-ons. Either way, they always disappeared fast. Applesauce donuts proved that you could make something comforting and shareable out of whatever you had sitting on your shelf. Hot buttered toast with cinnamon sugar was the unofficial breakfast of rushed mornings and picky eaters. No one had time to cook a full spread every day, and this sweet little trick turned plain white bread into something magical in under 5 minutes. You would toast a slice or two, spread on real butter while it was still hot, and then sprinkle a mix of cinnamon and sugar right on top. The butter would melt down, the cinnamon would sink in, and suddenly you had a breakfast that felt cozy and a little indulgent. No mess, no complaints, and no leftovers. This was one of those treats that kids never got tired of, and let's be honest, neither did adults. Some families even kept a shaker of cinnamon sugar pre-mixed and ready to go. You would find it next to the salt and pepper, like it belonged there. For all its simplicity, this toast had charm. It was quick, warm, and had a way of making even a gloomy morning a little brighter. Scrambled eggs with American cheese were diner food brought home in the very best way. Back then, American cheese was not something to apologize for. It was creamy, melty, and made scrambled eggs taste like a dream. Housewives knew how to cook them low and slow, folding in squares of cheese just before the eggs finished setting. The result was a soft, velvety pile of yellow goodness that clung to your fork like it had something to prove. No herbs, no vegetables, no toppings, just eggs and cheese, plain and perfect. Served with toast or sometimes a sausage link on the side, it was the kind of breakfast you could throw together in 10 minutes and still feel proud of. It fed tired dads, fussy kids, and the occasional neighbor who dropped by unannounced. It was a meal that did not need to be complicated to be good. In fact, that was kind of the point. Scrambled eggs with American cheese reminded everyone that simple food could still feel like a small reward. Peach coffee cake with crumb topping was the kind of breakfast that turned heads at church potlucks and family gatherings alike. Whether made with canned peaches or the real thing from a backyard tree, the fruit gave it a bright, syrupy flavor that soaked into the soft cake underneath. The crumb topping, made from butter, sugar, and flour, baked into a crispy golden crust that added texture and sweetness to every bite. Housewives loved it because it could be made ahead of time, sliced easily, and served warm or cold with a pot of coffee nearby. It was one of those reliable, crowd-pleasing recipes that got passed around on handwritten cards and folded into old cookbooks with floury smudges on the pages. Kids liked it because it was basically dessert for breakfast, and no one was there to stop them. The best versions were tender in the middle, loaded with peach slices, and generous with the crumb on top. It was both fancy and familiar, and in the 1950s, that combination made it a household favorite. Peanut butter toast with sliced apples was the picture of modern efficiency in the mid-century kitchen. Magazines and nutrition guides at the time were filled with advice on how to build a balanced breakfast, and this little combo checked all the boxes. Whole grain toast if you had it, white bread if you did not, topped with a swipe of peanut butter and a few thin slices of apple. Quick to make, packed with protein and sweet enough to keep the kids quiet for a few minutes. The apples added crunch and brightness, while the peanut butter gave it enough heft to hold you through school or work. Some families added a drizzle of honey, others a sprinkle of cinnamon, but even plain, it was satisfying. It was the kind of breakfast that made people feel like they were moving into a new, better era, something faster, cleaner, and smarter. If you were trying to stretch groceries or just keep up with the times, peanut butter and apples were your allies. Orange juice gelatin cubes were like the breakfast version of a science project, with a little bit of fun, a little bit of vitamin C, and a whole lot of jiggle. Housewives in the 1950s were always looking for new ways to make breakfast exciting, especially for kids who were not easily impressed by porridge or toast. So you would take orange juice, usually from concentrate, and mix it with gelatin to make these soft, bouncy cubes that tasted like sunshine. Served cold and cut into tidy squares, they were refreshing, colorful, and a little bit playful. Some versions added grated carrots or bits of canned pineapple, depending on what you had on hand. It was not fancy, but it felt modern, like something out of a home economics textbook. Kids loved the wobble, adults liked the vitamins, and everyone appreciated a break from the usual. In a time before smoothie bowls and chia seeds, this was about as experimental as breakfast got. Shredded wheat with warm cream and sugar was comfort in a bowl, no matter how old you were. This was not the dry, tasteless cereal you might imagine. It was big, hearty biscuits of wheat that got softened with a pour of warm milk or cream, then sweetened with a spoonful of sugar or honey. It was slow food, the kind of breakfast you ate sitting down with steam rising from the bowl and maybe the morning paper nearby. Parents trusted it because it was filling, nutritious, and simple. No colors, no cartoon mascots, just real food. For kids, it became a ritual, something tied to winter mornings and wool socks and the smell of toast in the air. The soft texture made it feel like porridge, but with a little more body. It stuck with you in the best way. And if you were lucky, there might be a second helping waiting at the bottom of the pot. Puffed oven pancakes, known in some kitchens as Dutch babies, were the dramatic, golden breakfast showstoppers that took almost no effort to make. You would pour a simple batter of eggs, flour, and milk into a hot buttered skillet, then slide it into the oven and watch it puff up like magic. The edges would curl high, the center would bubble gently, and by the time you pulled it out, it looked like something from a bakery window. All it needed was a dusting of powdered sugar, maybe a squeeze of lemon or a spoonful of jam. It felt impressive, almost fancy, but the secret was how easy it truly was. Housewives appreciated the simplicity. Kids loved watching it rise, and everyone at the table dug in before it deflated, which it always did in the most satisfying way. This was the kind of breakfast that turned an ordinary morning into something memorable. Not too sweet, not too rich, and just different enough to feel exciting. One pan, a few ingredients, and suddenly, breakfast was a celebration. Tomato juice and toast was the kind of no-nonsense breakfast that defined health trends in the 1950s. Back then, juice was not just a side beverage, it was a prescribed part of a balanced meal, often recommended in school pamphlets and nutrition guides. You would pour yourself a glass of bright red tomato juice, maybe chilled, maybe room temperature, and pair it with a slice or two of buttered toast. That was it. And somehow, it was enough. Housewives liked that it was quick, inexpensive, and vitamin-packed. Doctors liked that it kept people full without weighing them down. Kids, well, they tolerated it. But there was something oddly satisfying about the saltiness of the juice and the crunch of warm bread. It was clean, simple, and comforting in a way that only post-war optimism could make possible. Not everyone remembers this combo fondly, but it had staying power for a reason. Sometimes breakfast was not about indulgence, sometimes it was just about starting the day off right, with something honest. Molasses bran muffins were like tiny brown promises that you were doing something good for your body, even if you were not entirely sure how. These muffins were dense, rich, and a little sticky thanks to the molasses, which gave them a deep, almost smoky sweetness that clung to your teeth in the best way. Bran flakes or wheat germ were folded into the batter, turning each bite into a fiber-packed commitment to morning wellness. In the 1950s, people were starting to talk about digestive regularity with a straight face, and these muffins were often the solution. They were baked in batches, wrapped in wax paper, and tucked into lunchboxes or eaten with a cup of coffee and a side of grapefruit. Some homemakers would stir in raisins or nuts. Others kept them plain and honest. Either way, you walked away from breakfast feeling full, virtuous, and just a little proud of yourself. They were not flashy, but they got the job done. And sometimes that is all you need a muffin to do. Savory grits with butter and salt were the quiet kind of comfort food. Nothing flashy, but warm and reliable in a way that mattered. In the South, grits were breakfast royalty made from ground hominy and simmered low and slow until they reached that perfect creamy texture. Some folks used milk, others just water, but what tied them all together was that generous swirl of butter and a heavy pinch of salt. No sugar, no syrup, just something simple that stuck to your ribs and felt like home. For many families, this was an everyday staple. served in chipped bowls on quiet mornings. Housewives liked it because it was cheap and easy to make in big batches. Kids liked it because it filled them up without complaint. And anyone who tasted it knew that no matter how plain it looked, it delivered where it counted. It was also endlessly adaptable. Later in the day, you could add cheese or an egg and call it lunch. But in the morning, just as it was enough. Toad in the hole was the kind of breakfast that made you smile even before you took the first bite. It was simple. Take a slice of white bread, cut a hole in the middle, and crack an egg into the empty space while it sizzled in a buttered pan. As the egg cooked, the bread toasted in the pan, turning golden and crisp around the edges. The cutout lid was toasted alongside and used to dip into the runny yolk. It was silly, it was fun, and it was a genius way to make eggs feel new. Kids absolutely loved it. It looked like something out of a cartoon, and adults found it just as satisfying. In the 1950s, this was an easy, hands-on breakfast that made mornings feel a little brighter. No extra dishes, no long prep, just something warm and filling that could be made in under 10 minutes. Breakfast did not have to be complicated. Sometimes it just needed a little charm. Cinnamon swirl coffee bread was a loaf that made weekday mornings feel a little bit like Sunday. Sweet, soft, and laced with a ribbon of cinnamon sugar through the middle, this bread was made ahead of time and sliced as needed, if it lasted that long. Housewives loved it because it made enough to serve a crowd or stash in the freezer, and kids loved it because it tasted like dessert but passed as breakfast. It was yeasty, tender, and just the right amount of indulgent. Most versions were baked in loaf pans, sliced thick, and served with a pat of butter or a cup of coffee on the side. You might toast it, you might not, but either way, it always felt like a treat. The swirl inside was never perfect, which made each slice a little different and somehow even better. It was the kind of breakfast that brought people to the table without needing to be asked twice. Bacon and egg breakfast cups were the 1950s answer to the grab-and-go meal, except people were not really going anywhere just yet. These little baked wonders started with a slice of bacon curled around the inside of a muffin tin, then filled with a cracked egg and maybe a sprinkle of cheese or breadcrumbs. They baked up into tidy, self-contained bites that were savory, satisfying, and easy to serve. Housewives loved that they could prep a dozen at once with minimal cleanup, and the novelty of them made even picky kids take notice. It was the kind of breakfast that looked fancier than it was and tasted better than it needed to. Bacon crisped around the edges, the eggs stayed soft in the middle, and each bite had just enough richness to keep you full. They felt modern and efficient in a decade obsessed with kitchen convenience. And that is probably why they stuck around. You can still find versions of them today. But it all started with bacon, eggs, and a muffin tin. Apples and raisins cooked in oatmeal were the quiet heroes of 1950s breakfasts. Reliable, hearty, and far from boring once you got it right. Plain oatmeal was never going to cut it for very long, especially in families where breakfast had to do the work of 2 meals. That is where fruit came in. Diced apples and handfuls of raisins simmered with the oats, sweetening them naturally and softening just enough to melt into every bite. The apples gave it texture, the raisins gave it chew, and together they turned porridge into something you actually looked forward to. Housewives liked that it used up fruit that was past its prime, and kids liked that it was sweet enough without needing sugar on top. It was warm, filling, and forgiving. You could tweak it every day and never get bored. Some families added a pat of butter, a splash of cream, or a shake of cinnamon. Others used leftover baked apples from dessert the night before. It was a dish that felt humble but well thought out. It was also cheap, easy to prepare, and kept everyone full long enough to push lunch back a little. That alone made it a morning favorite. Cold rice with milk and sugar was the breakfast that proved leftovers could be magic. Last night's rice, usually white and a little dry, was revived in the morning with a pour of cold milk and a spoonful of sugar stirred together into something soft and soothing. In homes where waste was not an option, this dish was a small victory. Some mornings you had fruit, maybe a few raisins or chopped dates. Other times it was just plain rice, gently sweetened and chilled like a soft cereal. Some folks added a dash of cinnamon or nutmeg, others kept it simple and let the rice speak for itself. It was especially popular in summertime, when hot food felt like too much and cold breakfasts were easier to handle. No one bragged about it, and you would not find it in cookbooks, but it stayed in rotation because it worked. You did not serve it to guests. You did not need a recipe. It was just one of those dishes that showed up when the cupboard was bare and still managed to feel complete. That kind of quiet utility made it a breakfast worth remembering. Buttered toast with jelly and cottage cheese was the breakfast that nobody expected to work, and somehow it always did. Toasted white bread, slathered with fruit jelly, topped with a small scoop of cottage cheese, sweet, tangy, creamy, and warm all at once. In the 1950s, this was one of those modern health breakfasts you might see in a women's magazine or a home economics guide. Cottage cheese was having its moment, promoted for its protein, its lightness, and its versatility. Pairing it with toast and jelly gave it a little glamour without losing its practicality. Housewives liked that it felt trendy but still used everyday ingredients. Kids liked that it was colorful and mild, something that did not require chewing too much or sitting too long. It became especially popular with homemakers who were watching their weight or trying to follow the latest health advice without sacrificing flavor. For families on tight budgets, it offered nutrition and novelty in a single bite. No pans to scrub, no leftovers to deal with, and nothing wasted. It might not have made the neighbors jealous, but it got you through the morning with your head held high. That counts for a lot. Tomato juice and a toasted English muffin was the stripped-down breakfast of every vintage weight loss guide and old cookbook trying to keep mornings fast, efficient, and low-calorie. You would pour a glass of chilled tomato juice, toast an English muffin, maybe spread a little butter if the diet allowed, and that was breakfast. It was basic, practical, and done in under 10 minutes. Back then, this was advertised as a smart start to the day, simple, savory, and filling without much effort. Housewives, office workers, and even students were told this meal would keep you going without weighing you down. It showed up everywhere from hospital diet plans to homemaker magazines, quietly filling bellies long before protein shakes and pre-packed bars took over. The tomato juice gave a little bite, the English muffin brought warmth, and together they were enough to start the day when time and groceries were tight. It is one of those breakfasts nobody brags about now, but it quietly got families through busy mornings without all the bells and whistles. Frozen waffles were not always trendy. In fact, in the 1970s, they were barely waffles. They came out stiff, pale, and freezer-burned, and you would shove them into a toaster and pray they did not come out still cold in the middle. Eggo waffles were a revolution, sure, but they were also kind of sad. They were not crisp unless you nearly burnt them, and they absorbed syrup like a sponge that had given up on life. But they were fast, and that was everything. Parents would toss one on a paper plate and call it breakfast. No whipped cream, no berries, just syrup, maybe margarine if it was payday. The commercials made them look like golden magic, but in real life, they were floppy, forgettable, and weirdly satisfying. If you remember struggling to butter a still frozen waffle, or watching one fly out of the toaster and land on the floor, you already know the deal. It was not gourmet, it was survival. And for kids of the 1970s and 1980s, this was the norm. But waffles were not the only thing you pulled from a box. Some breakfasts came in actual tin cans and were advertised like they had been launched from a cannon. Scrapple, a traditional Pennsylvania Dutch dish, dates back to the 17th century. It's a savory breakfast item made from pork scraps and cornmeal, formed into a loaf and fried. The dish uses specific animal parts like pork liver, heart, and trimmings, combined with cornmeal and spices, creating a unique flavor profile. Scrapple is usually fried and garnished with maple syrup or ketchup, making it versatile. Scrapple is considered one of the earliest forms of American comfort food, as it was created by German immigrants who settled in Pennsylvania. It's popular for its rich flavor and association with Pennsylvania Dutch culture. It became a regional specialty due to its resourcefulness and distinctive taste. Scrapple holds cultural significance as a testament to frugality and tradition, often served with eggs or toast. Curious how Jiffy Pop pancakes made morning meals a breeze with their just add water mix during the hectic 70s. This convenience resonated deeply with the 1970s households, streamlining the morning routine remarkably. The product's simplicity allowed anyone to quickly whip up pancakes, making it a popular choice among families with busy schedules. Jiffy Pop's marketing cleverly focused on these time-saving aspects, often showcasing family breakfasts that were both delicious and hassle-free. The mix was versatile, catering to various taste preferences with different flavors. While Jiffy Pop pancakes enjoyed popularity due to their convenience and taste, the evolving breakfast market eventually led to reduced visibility and presence, as newer breakfast options continued to diversify. Costing nothing but $1.03 of your time as the service worker assembled it, Taco Bell's mini skillet bowls were an amazing breakfast and lunch that people adored picking up. Why was it so good for takeout especially, and not a meal you would typically sit down and have? Because it was super quick in all regards, the preparation and the consumption. A quick affair to get you all readied up on your way to work or school, and it was always a sunny plus side that it left you with enough lunch money for later. In the corporate world, you really need cash on hand at all times for those midday cravings, and that is a part of why fast food culture and restaurants got so popular in the first place. Since the famous old Bell decided to take down the mini skillet bowls from their already stellar menu, people have found quick substitutes and ways around it. Peanut butter and honey milkshakes were the quick breakfast booster you would find in every 1960s teen handbook or homemaker guide promising energy in minutes. You would toss peanut butter, milk, and honey into a blender, give it a good mix, and breakfast was done before you could even finish your coffee. It sounds simple now, but back then it was practical, filling, and surprisingly satisfying. Parents loved it because it was affordable and kept teenagers full, and teenagers loved it because it tasted like dessert for breakfast. Some folks added ice or fruit if they had extra, but the basic recipe stayed the same. Peanut butter for protein, honey for sweetness, and milk to bring it all together. It showed up in old cookbooks, school lunch suggestions, and quick breakfast guides long before protein shakes and energy drinks filled grocery aisles. Somewhere along the way, it disappeared under the weight of modern trends, but back then, it was the kind of breakfast that quietly got families through rushed mornings with nothing but pantry staples and a blender. Grape-Nuts was not a cereal. It was a challenge, a bowl of hard, crunchy nuggets that felt more like punishment than breakfast, unless you knew the trick. You had to soften them with hot water. That was the secret. Pour it in, let it sit, and wait. If you were impatient, you would regret it. Teeth were lost to Grape-Nuts. It was dense, it was earthy, and it never pretended to be fun. But for a generation raised on rationing and stretching every dollar, Grape-Nuts had value. It was filling. It was affordable. And it lasted forever in the pantry. You could mix in some sugar, a splash of milk, maybe a bit of cinnamon if you were feeling fancy. But most days, it was just water and hope. Kids today would call it cardboard. Back then, it was considered hearty. And the weird thing is, some people actually liked it that way. Especially when the weather was cold and the house was quiet, a warm bowl of Grape-Nuts felt kind of grounding. Not exciting, not delicious, just real. But sometimes, when you were lucky or just ran out of options, breakfast came straight from the fridge and straight from dessert. German pancakes, also known as Dutch babies, are a unique breakfast dish that originated in the early 20th century. These pancakes are often topped with powdered sugar or fruit. The ingredients for German pancakes include eggs, flour, milk, and sugar, creating a batter that is poured into a hot skillet and baked in the oven. The key ingredient that gives German pancakes their distinct puffiness is eggs, which cause the batter to rise dramatically while baking. These pancakes are typically served with a squeeze of lemon and a dusting of powdered sugar, enhancing their delicate flavor. In the 1960s, Dutch babies gained popularity in California, thanks to Sunset magazine featuring the recipe in their publication. German pancakes are also commonly referred to as Dutch babies, a name popularized in the United States. Remember Grape-Nuts flakes? Introduced as a variant of the original Grape-Nuts cereal, offered a flakier texture while retaining the nutritional benefits of the original, such as being high in fiber and low in sugar. These flakes appealed to consumers seeking a nutritious yet convenient breakfast option, fitting well into a balanced diet. Known for their crunchy texture, Grape-Nuts flakes were often consumed with milk or yogurt, providing a satisfying meal. The cereal was marketed for its health benefits, which resonated with health-conscious consumers. The distinct texture and robust flavor of Grape-Nuts flakes made them a staple in some homes, favored for their contribution to a healthy lifestyle and their ability to offer a fulfilling start to the day. The McDonald's steak, egg, and cheese bagel came out around the same time as its big breakfast and was often something families ordered together when they ate out. The incredible mix of egg and cheese with really flavorful steak bits into a bagel was something people in the States could not get enough of. It was especially popular with the older crowd, which is funny because the company initially thought it would be more popular with the younger crowd. Back then, you could get this bagel for $1.25, which was a reasonable steal and a perfect add-on at the time. Breakfast menus around the nation had a hard time competing with the steak, egg, and cheese bagel. And despite it being discontinued, it is an 80s icon we really want back. Molasses milk with soda crackers. Sounds strange now, but for rural families and Depression-era kitchens, it was a fast, practical breakfast when the fridge was nearly bare. You would warm up some milk, stir in molasses for sweetness, and crumble soda crackers right on top. That was it. It was not fancy, but it filled you up, gave you a little energy, and made use of things that lasted forever in the pantry. Molasses was cheaper than sugar and packed with nutrients. Soda crackers were everywhere, and milk, fresh or canned, was always a breakfast staple. Old farm cookbooks, church recipe cards, and rural homemaker guides all had versions of this tucked inside, passed around by folks who knew how to stretch the simplest ingredients. It was humble, filling, and comforting in its own odd way. These days, it is almost unheard of, replaced by granola bars and cereal bowls. But back then, this quiet little breakfast got people through hard mornings with nothing but warm milk and a little ingenuity. Butter was a luxury, margarine was suspicious, but bacon grease? That was breakfast gold. If you had a metal canister on the stove filled with congealed fat and a strainer on top, you already know where this is going. Toast with bacon drippings was a rite of passage. Crispy white bread smeared with yesterday's leftover lard, sometimes sprinkled with salt, sometimes just eaten as is. It was smoky, greasy, and completely satisfying. And back then, no one cared about saturated fats or cholesterol levels. The grease was recycled like liquid currency. Families kept it in old coffee tins or jelly jars, and if you ever scooped a thick glob of solid bacon fat onto toast and watched it melt into the bread like butter from another planet, then yes, you might be old. This was fuel for a long day, and it came with that unmistakable aroma that clung to your clothes long after the plate was clean. You did not waste anything. That was the rule. If you had bacon, you kept the grease. If you had grease, you made toast. And if you were really lucky, you had something even fancier waiting in the freezer. It came in a yellow box, and all you had to do was Lego. The bologna and egg breakfast sandwich is a straightforward and satisfying dish that has been enjoyed since the mid-20th century. This dish combines fried bologna, a cooked egg, and cheese on a soft roll or bread. Fried bologna sandwiches have been a staple in working-class American households since the early 20th century, providing a hearty and affordable meal option. The bologna is typically prepared by frying it until it develops a crispy edge, while the egg is cooked to preference, often sunny side up or over easy. The sandwich is usually served on a soft roll or white bread, complementing the savory fillings. In 2019, a food truck in Nashville, Tennessee, gained attention for serving gourmet versions of the classic bologna and egg sandwich, elevating it to a trendy brunch item. Heard about space food sticks? Launched in the early 70s, these snacks promised a taste of astronaut life right on your snack plate. Introduced in the early 1970s, they were marketed as a nutritious option that provided sustained energy with flavors like peanut butter and chocolate. The novelty of their space-age concept, combined with practical packaging that made them easy to consume on the go, initially drew considerable attention. The connection to NASA and the allure of consuming astronaut food added to their appeal, particularly among children and young adults intrigued by space travel. The innovative approach of space food sticks to combining nutrition with the excitement of space exploration helped them capture a unique niche in the snack market. One of the less talked about breakfast biscuits is the Dairy Queen sausage breakfast biscuit, which did much better than people gave it credit for. Egg, cheese, and sausage stuffed between two crispy biscuit halves made for a really nice and easy-to-handle breakfast. It was also just a great add-on if you felt like starting your day with more of a full stomach or needed a bit of a boost to get through the day. People would also buy a half dozen or so and save them for later during their lunch break, and nutritionally, it was not so bad. They were just for 79 cents and raised some serious spikes in the company's sales for the time they spent in the market. McDonald's tried to break into some very unfamiliar territory with the McPizza, which did better than you would think and poorer than they had hoped. It definitely did have a strong fan base, but it just did not have enough of one, as pizzas were not exactly the brand's specialty. Still, the McPizza was a good choice to go for when you wanted an affordable and neat pizza, but did not want to commit to a whole proper pie from your favorite downtown joint. Also, people associated McDonald's with fast service, and the pizza usually took 15-20 minutes, and nobody had that kind of time for their drive-through orders, so they let go of the item in 1991. Oatmeal with brown sugar and cream was about as classic as breakfast could get. Quick oats simmered on the stove, topped with a spoonful of brown sugar and a splash of canned milk. It was ready in 10 minutes flat, cheap to make, and warm enough to shake off the worst winter mornings. Families across America leaned on this breakfast when budgets were tight, but everyone still needed something filling to start the day. Quick oats cooked faster than traditional oats, brown sugar gave just enough sweetness, and canned milk made the whole thing creamy even if fresh milk was hard to come by. It showed up in school lunch guides, frugal homemaker magazines, and those old cookbooks buried at the back of every kitchen drawer. For a lot of folks, this was not a special occasion breakfast. It was the daily routine, quiet, dependable, and gone in under 10 minutes. Funny how something so ordinary could disappear so completely, replaced by instant packets and flashy coffee shop menus. Maypo was the hot cereal you either begged for or had to be bribed into eating. It came in a tin with a little cartoon boy on the front. "I want my Maypo," a slogan that somehow made bland maple mush sound exciting. But Maypo was not just food. It was part of the morning ritual. You would stir the mix into hot milk, trying to keep the clumps down, while the house still smelled like someone forgot toast in the oven. For many families, this was a warm and filling meal in the middle of a cold winter, and you would eat it while bundled in flannel pajamas, watching condensation fog up the windows. It was sweet, but not too sweet. A cousin of oatmeal, but somehow both smoother and stranger. And for some kids, it was the only hot thing on the menu before heading off to school. But if you stuck a pat of margarine in the middle and waited for it to melt into a tiny golden crater, you know exactly what I am talking about. That was breakfast. And if hot cereal does not do it for you, maybe you were more of a meat and eggs person. Not bacon, though. Something far less polite. Buttered grits, a Southern staple, originated in colonial America. This simple yet beloved dish is usually served as a side or base for other toppings. Made from ground corn, grits are cooked with water or milk until creamy. Then butter is added for richness. The dish is synonymous with Southern cuisine, particularly in Charleston, South Carolina, known for its love of grits. Grits are remembered for their comforting texture and versatility, which made them a popular breakfast dish in the 1970s. Traditional or unusual toppings like cheese, shrimp, or gravy enhance the dish. The dish's cultural significance lies in its association with Southern hospitality and hearty breakfasts. In some southern states, grits are even considered a delicacy and are often served at special occasions and celebrations. Introduced in 1963, Sunny Delight positioned itself as a healthier alternative to sodas by offering a vitamin-enriched, citrus-flavored beverage that quickly captured the market's attention. Its bright color and sweet taste made it a hit among children, while its marketing campaigns emphasized a fun and active lifestyle, integrating Sunny D into scenes of youthful energy and outdoor activities. Despite its success, the brand encountered criticism for its high sugar content and low percentage of real juice, prompting several reformulations to increase authenticity and align with healthier consumer preferences. These changes allowed Sunny D to update its image and product offerings to better meet the expectations of modern consumers looking for healthier drink options. Speaking of eggs, the Burger King enormous omelet sandwich came out around 2005 and rocked breakfast menus just as much as a good McDonald's bagel. A behemoth in both size and calories, this drew so much attention on social media and fans went in droves excited to try out the new mouth-watering monstrosity. For about $3.29, you could have yourself a full-course breakfast meal, and if you do not trust us, then no worries. The numbers speak for themselves, and Burger King saw a 20% hike in breakfast sales that left the bigwigs speechless. We guess you can never really go wrong with eggs and bread, which may just be the food equivalent of man's best friend. Baked bean toast was the quick, savory breakfast that filled countless plates across New England when mornings were rushed, but you still needed something hot and satisfying. You would toast a slice of bread, spoon on canned baked beans, maybe top it with cheese or butter, and slide it under the broiler. Breakfast was done in under 10 minutes, hearty enough to carry you through a long day. Families loved it because it was affordable, practical, and good enough to stretch one can of beans into a meal for the whole house. Old cookbooks, factory lunch guides, and frugal homemaker magazines all praised this trick for making mornings easy without giving up flavor. Some folks added mustard or hot sauce, others kept it plain, but either way, it was the kind of breakfast that quietly filled bellies when nothing else seemed to last. These days, it barely gets a mention, but back then, baked bean toast was one of those small comforts that made hard mornings feel bearable. Scrapple was breakfast for the brave. It came in a brick, gray, speckled, and confusing to anyone who had not grown up with it. But for folks in Pennsylvania and parts of the Mid-Atlantic, this was a morning staple. Scrapple is what happens when you take pork scraps, cornmeal, flour, and spices, mash it into a loaf, and fry slices until they are crispy on the outside and soft on the inside. It is not pretty, it is not delicate, but it is undeniably part of American food history. You would eat it with eggs, or sometimes just on its own, maybe with ketchup or syrup, depending on how adventurous you were feeling. And it did what breakfast was supposed to do. It filled you up and kept you going. No fancy branding, no cartoon mascots, just a slab of meat mush and a hot skillet. It was Depression-era ingenuity at its tastiest, and if the smell of it frying in lard brings you back to a yellow-tinged kitchen with loud pans and louder parents, then you already know. But Scrapple was not the only strange slab to hit the table in those days. Some of them even came in boxes pretending to be cereal. Hamburger hash, a hearty and comforting dish, became popular in the mid-20th century. It's a breakfast favorite made with ground beef, potatoes, and onions sautéed together. Ground chuck is often used for a flavorful base. Hamburger hash is garnished with fresh herbs or served with eggs, adding to its satisfying taste. The dish became popular for its convenience and hearty appeal, especially for families or large groups. Regional variations exist, such as incorporating bell peppers or different meats. In some regions, corned beef hash is a popular variation, using corned beef instead of ground beef. The dish was commonly paired with coffee or juice for breakfast, reflecting America's love for hearty morning meals. McDonald's is a name anyone can recognize and still holds up today just as much as before, but do you remember when they were serving the iconic Big Breakfast at stores? McDonald's best and most iconic starter was probably their Big Breakfast, which literally everybody can remember having. This dish was truly a star on the 70s and 80s menus way before anybody ever even thought of a McMuffin. Mostly popular amongst teenagers working part-time, and McDonald's staff would enjoy a big breakfast on early work days. It was not just them, trust us. 8-year-olds to 35-year-olds all enjoyed getting soft, delicious scrambled eggs served with the fluffiest muffins you could get under $1. Sounds like a pretty good deal, right? No wonder it performed as well as it did, even if it got discontinued in 2002 in favor of hot dogs and burgers. Creamed eggs on toast involves gently chopped hard-boiled eggs in a creamy sauce, often seasoned with herbs and spices, served over toasted bread. This dish, known for its comforting qualities and simple preparation, became a favored breakfast and light meal option, aligning with American preferences for hearty, straightforward dishes. The versatility and seasoning allowed for a variety of flavors, making it a popular choice in both diners and home kitchens. The dish's rich, creamy texture combined with the ease of preparation made it a reliable choice for a satisfying meal, fitting well into the meal routines of many seeking both comfort and simplicity in their culinary choices. Taco Bell took a note out of McDonald's playbook and came up with a chicken biscuit of its own with the Taco Bell Biscuit Taco. This was a crispy chicken in a biscuit taco with jalapeno honey flavoring. What made this particularly so successful was how it stayed fresh and exactly as crispy as when it left the fryer even after a 20-minute car ride home. Now that is some real value for your money, wouldn't you agree? Plus, the crushed bits of tortilla chip that you could find in the taco were just the perfect topping, making it a very satisfying breakfast snack. The kind of thing that gives you more of a will to live as you keep crunching and munching away near a dozen without noticing, at least, back when they used to be that cheap. Affording large amounts of it would later get pricier, and people started to get tired of the crisp being its main shtick. The biscuit taco had a pretty successful run while it lasted, but it did vanish into America's food history towards the 2000s. We would never say no to a crispy taco in any shape or form, though, and it seems like loads of people throughout the years have agreed. Peanut butter and banana on toast was not just a breakfast. It was a survival trick hidden in government pamphlets and school lunch guides from decades past. You toasted a slice of bread, slathered on peanut butter, and sliced up a banana right on top. It sounds basic now, but during hard times this was protein, potassium, and energy in one affordable package. Families loved it because it was cheap, quick, and used things every pantry had on hand. The United States Department of Agriculture even recommended it for busy families when money was tight but mornings were busier. Sometimes folks sprinkled sugar or honey over it, other times they kept it plain. Either way, it filled your belly fast and kept you going. It never made the glossy magazine spreads, but it was reliable, frugal, and good enough to get a generation out the door. These days, breakfasts come frozen or boxed, but back then, a piece of toast and a banana could carry you through the morning. Tang was not just a drink, it was a vibe. A wildly artificial, suspiciously orange-colored powder that turned a glass of water into something vaguely citrus-flavored. Kids in the 1960s thought it was what astronauts drank in space, and that made it cool. Never mind the fact that it tasted like melted vitamin gummies mixed with sidewalk chalk. This was cutting-edge science in a cup. You would stir it in and watch it cloud up, like some kind of glowing chemical experiment. Parents told themselves it was fortified, but what it really fortified was the belief that flavor was optional. If you had Tang with toast, you know that was a bold pairing. Dry on dry, sugar on sugar. But that was the thing. Back then, meals did not always have to make sense. They just had to fill you up and keep the kids quiet before school. And if you ever double-dipped your toast into a glass of Tang because milk was out, then buckle up. Because we are about to enter the world of hot cereal that came with a mascot and a warning label. Kugel spread on toast was a quirky and delightful dish first created in the early 1970s. The dish consists of kugel, a flavored peanut butter spread slathered on toast. Kugel came in various unique flavors like chocolate, vanilla, cinnamon, and banana, making it a playful alternative to regular peanut butter. The spread, manufactured by Kraft, became popular due to its unique and sweet flavors, which appealed to children and adults alike. The most popular flavor of Kugel spread was chocolate, which was often enjoyed as a sweet breakfast treat or snack. Kugel was discontinued in the late 1970s due to declining sales. Post-fortified oat flakes were marketed as a health-oriented breakfast option, enriched with vitamins and minerals to appeal to health-conscious consumers. Introduced by Post cereals, they were promoted for their benefits like improved heart health and additional fiber, aligning with the increasing health trends of the mid-20th century. The oat flakes stood out for their nutritional value and were marketed through various campaigns emphasizing their health benefits. These flakes were known for their hearty texture, which provided a fulfilling start to the day, making them a favored choice for those looking to maintain a healthy diet. The focus on health and nutrition helped establish post-fortified oat flakes as a reliable breakfast option during their time on the market. A mini skillet bowl sounds healthy enough, right? That was not the only fast food name that would take a step in a more greener direction, as McDonald's came out with their fruit and yogurt parfait sometime after their big breakfast, initially being a sweet cup you could get for just $1. It was also a wonderful breakfast if you were trying for a healthier lifestyle or were one of those early morning run people. Maybe you had the gym in the afternoon and were keener on lighter breakfasts, or maybe you just want to get your fruit game up. Either way, the parfait sold in waves and made sales go high for an item that was irregular from the rest of the menu. Unfortunately, it was something they discontinued during the pandemic to make service quicker for workers because everyone prioritized minimizing contact back then. If these breakfasts stirred a memory or made you smile, drop your favorite in the comments, like the video, and subscribe for more warm bites of the past.